back in across the pond, back in England. Last time I had a brother from England was Martin Fox of Lewis Masonic. But now I'm with Worshipful Brother Peter Boyd. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So we were talking a bit offline. You are the Provincial Charity Grand Steward for the Province of Dorset. That is something, every Masonic jurisdiction has some type of, or is involved with some type of charitable works, either formally or informally. Here in Ontario, the Grand Master, has a charity every year. But a charity steward, that's something unique, at least within my Masonic journey. So before we talk about yourself, can you tell us a little bit about what your role is as a charity steward, and kind of what your responsibilities are?
Okay. Well, every lodge in Dorset, 49 of them, will have as an office a lodge charity steward, and it's his job to assist the master of that lodge to raise funds for charity. He will be the key point, the organizer of charity events that will raise money, collections at lodge meetings, raffles, all sorts of things. He organizes those things. As Provincial Grand Charity Steward, I'm working for Province, supporting all of those charity stewards across our county, Dorset, with assistance. So I give them guidance on how best to raise the money, how to approach the different legal aspects of raising money for charities. We've got a tax scheme going on in the UK called Gift Aid, which allows us to benefit from money that we're donating to charity by 25%, which is how we administer that, but it's quite tightly controlled. I'm also their point of contact back with the main Masonic charity based in London, which is the Masonic Charitable Foundation. They are the largest, or one of the largest, grant makers and donators to charity across England and Wales. And their funds and the money they use to donate that comes directly from donations made by Freemasons across England and Wales under a scheme called the Festival Scheme, which is a rolling cycle of donations from different provinces around the country. And that festival is what we're in at the moment in Dorset, raising money for 2025, and we have a target or a goal of £1.25 million to be raised by the end of 2025, which we will then present to the MCF, and then they can go off, and then we get a break for about 11 years, and then we're off again. So it's my role to guide all of the charity stewards across the province to make sure that they understand how that works, the best ways to do it. There's lots of different ways to pay and all sorts of things like that. So I give guidance for that. And I'm also the interface between them and the MCF. So when they're making donations, they do that either through me or in connection with me, so I can see what's going on, and I can then advise them and let them know what's going on. I can also tell them how they're doing in terms of progress with the festival, because each lodge has its own goal as well as the province, so we just divide the figure up. So that's basically what I do. So and I spend most of my time doing that. Seems to be a full-time job now. I've retired. So
is your position appointed by Grand Lodge, or is it selected by at the provincial level?
I'm appointed by the Provincial Grand Master. So, and I was appointed, well, I get reappointed every year. So providing I do my job and he's happy with what I do, I get reappointed. It's not an automatic thing. I was appointed first time around as charity steward 2 years ago. So I've been enrolled for 2 years.
Now, I'd assume that that your role is challenging under the best of circumstances, but the last 2 years we've been dealing, the whole world has been dealing with COVID. I know every jurisdiction has had different lockdown measures and preventative and protective measures to deal with COVID. I know that England did have, your share of lockdowns. What's it been like? Well, we'll talk about the Masonic meetings and that side of it, but just your role as charity steward. What's that been like, and how has COVID affected your role in trying to, whether it be the festival or just your work in general, assisting lodges with charitable endeavors?
Well, basically, yes. COVID has presented quite an issue. In England and Wales, we've been suspended, or were suspended twice during the COVID session, with a brief break this time last year, where lodges met, but they were only meeting in reduced numbers. When I say reduced numbers, a lodge was meeting with 6 members, basically to do business. So the lodge would open, do its business, and then close, and that would be the end of it. So that kind of made things difficult for fundraising. But obviously, one of our key points of fundraising are large meetings where guys get together and raise money for charity. Those didn't happen. The events that we would have on the other side of things, like social events and things like that, they didn't happen because hotels and hospitality was closed. So nothing was working. The one benefit that we've got, and the one thing that we've been working with and focusing on, was that there are a number of different ways brethren can contribute towards both the festival and any charities that have been in operation. One of those is by regular payment plans that we adopted back in 2014, believe it or not. And this means that the brethren just fill in a form and the money is automatically transferred from their bank accounts regularly every month. Well, obviously, those, other than resignations due to COVID and deaths and things like that, those have continued. So the fundraising from that side of things, which is primarily at the moment how the festival is funded, those have continued without any sort of any stop or pause. So that's carried on. Zoom and the internet means that we can communicate with each other, and we have been communicating with each other. I seem to live on Zoom at the moment, and we've been using this medium to try and generate funds via different things. One of the recent things we did, which raised quite a large sum of money, really, considering everybody was in lockdown, was that one of the things that you could do in lockdown was you could exercise. You were allowed to exercise either on your own or with a member of your own family group. And that exercise meant that you could go for a walk up to 2 or 3 miles from your home. In some cases, some people went further. So we organised, it ended up as being a friendly race, but it was a walk, a virtual walk to Grand Lodge. So we're based in Poole in Dorset. Now, Poole in Dorset is, or I'm based in Poole in Dorset. Poole in Dorset is down on the south coast. Grand Lodge is in London. That's 119 miles away. So the idea was that members of each lodge would record the mileages they do on a daily basis under their own lodge. And the first lodge to make it to the 119 miles was the winner. And it became so popular that we extended it from 119 miles, the walk to Grand Lodge, to a walk to and back from Grand Lodge. And then, even still popular, it carried on. So some lodges did 400 or 500 miles with only about 5 or 6 brethren actually doing the walking. And we were all engaged in that. And then the walk and the progress of all the lodges was posted over social media. So it was hosted online, and it became an online event. And that raised just under £9,000. So that's a reasonable amount of money, considering the number of people actually involved in it was quite small. So those sort of things are the things that we've been doing. So we have been moving forward, but obviously, because we're not moving forward as fast as we would have done had we been meeting.
Now, as you have been returning to lodges. I understand you're able to meet again in person. Um, what has that been like in terms of your role? Have you seen an increase in charitable giving? Are or is it just lodges are just busy trying to get back into the swing of meeting again and dealing with that? What's it been like, both in terms of charity and just Masonically in general, returning to lodge?
It's a bit of both, really. Here in our part of the world, traditionally, lodges in Dorset, there are a few that carry on all year round. Most lodges suspend for the summer. They have a summer break. My own mother lodge, which meets in Poole, we meet 10 times a year, and in July and August we don't meet. So this time of year we're not meeting. So this is no different to any normal year. The Masonic suspension came to an end earlier than that, sort of towards the end of June, July, like June, I think it was, or even May. And lodges have started going back. In fact, I've been to a lodge meeting already. And in terms of the restrictions at those meetings, it's basically sensible social distancing. But to all intents and purposes, the meetings are pretty much as they were before, albeit with slightly reduced numbers, because some of our brethren are still shielding. Particularly here in Dorset, rural county, lots of seasides, there's a bit of holiday stuff going on. It's a retirement centre, so our membership demographic is quite old. So a lot of our guys will be shielding. So a lot of the guys that will be regular attendees to meetings are still choosing not to come. My own lodge, of which I'm the secretary, is meeting at the end of September. Which is our next scheduled meeting, and all the things that go along with it. So our general purpose committee, our lodge of instruction, and everything else will be continuing in September as well. So it's kind of picking up where it goes on, and then carrying on. Now, from a fundraising point of view, yes, I'm seeing an increase in mail. Prior to the lockdown, I would probably be getting 3 or 4 letters a day from different lodges with donations and requests for information and stuff like that. During lockdown, that slowly trailed away till right at the end. I was not getting anything for maybe 2 or 3 months. But now I'm starting to get those letters again. So I'm getting maybe 1 or 2 letters every 2 or 3 days. So as lodges pick up, and not all the lodges are meeting. So we're envisaging a busy time when we go back.
And the other question I had in terms of charitable giving, charity, did you find, I spoke, as of the date we're recording this, yesterday I spoke to the Illinois Masonic Assistance Program out of Illinois, from the Grand Lodge of Illinois. Right on their website, when you go, there's a message from the program saying, if any brethren require assistance, you can apply for benevolence. Basically it's open up to anybody who's applying, who needs it, to apply for benevolence. Because obviously with lockdowns, there's financial aspect of it, business revenue down, all of that type of stuff. Yeah. In your jurisdiction, either the Province of Dorset or Grand Lodge more generally, what's it been like in terms of providing assistance, benevolence, or charitable giving to brethren who may be financially impacted by the lockdowns and other COVID measures?
Yeah. Okay, that's a major feature of what we're doing, and in fact, part of our strategy for a return to normal business is to focus on that aspect of charity, so the giving side rather than the taking side, and allowing the brethren, to those that are in need of support, to engage with the various charities. Now, in Dorset, we have the MCF, which operates across the country. We also have our own local charity called Dorset Masonic Care, whose primary role is purely that. It's the to assist and benefit those brethren that are suffering. And under COVID, a lot of brethren have been suffering. We're, like I said before, we're a hospitality centre here. It's a holiday area. And a lot of guys of businesses have been suspended. And although there's been a furlough scheme from the government where they've got paid, they're still not getting the same amount of money into their families. And the younger brethren are suffering, younger especially. Retirees, not so much. So yes, there is a big part of that. The other aspect of my role, because inside the province, as well as a Provincial Grand Charity Steward, there is a Provincial Grand Almoner. And the Provincial Grand Almoner's job is, if you kind of see it as, my role is to get the money in, and his role is to spend it. And his job is to look and go out to all those brethren across the province who are in need, and put them in contact with the right agencies, whether that be the MCF or Dorset Masonic Care, the DMC. And in terms of MCF's engagement in the province, they spend on average around about £200,000 in the various things that they do for support just in Dorset every year. So, and we are a particularly old population of Masons, unfortunately. So their commitment to it is going to be slightly higher than it would be somewhere else where there's a younger population. Just one other thing on that as well is at the start of the COVID thing and the lockdown, MCF and UGLE, United Grand Lodge of England, committed themselves to supporting communities outside of their own Masonic community around the country affected by COVID. And they set up a COVID fund, which we all donated to, and that raised £1 million. And one of my roles during the lockdown period, as well as trying to raise the money, has been identifying suitable charities and suitable outlets, projects, and everything else to channel that money back into the community, because it's important that we as Masons look after not just ourselves, but also the community that we reside in. And we've spent significant sums of money of the MCFs, basically raised from this COVID thing, and also from other aspects of it, including the festival money that we've been raising, supporting all sorts of stuff. And we've supported charities that deal with children's mental health affected by COVID. Right at the start of the pandemic, in the UK, you may have read there was a shortage of PPE for various medical organisations and care homes. A lot of cottage industries set up manufacturing it. And of course, these need to be financed, because these were people that sat at home and thought, what can we do to help? Let's do this. How do we do it? Oh, we need some funding. So we just channeled funding to them all. Food banks, obviously people affected by lack of funds, whatever, resorting to food banks. Food banks were under a lot of strain, so we were supporting the food banks across the province. And just Meals on Wheels services. People started providing Meals on Wheels services, and we funded all of that. And on top of that, the MCF across the country was supporting hospitals by supplying patients in COVID wards with tablets so that they could communicate using things like Zoom. Because obviously under isolation, they couldn't communicate with their relatives. So all of this sort of thing was to try and help our own community and channel some of those funds into that.
And in terms of the, this is something I've been curious about and done some research, the physical assets of the craft and being used to help Masonic buildings, Masonic temples. I'm just curious, in the 1950s, 1920s, my Masonic temple and many Masonic temples were used as mass vaccination sites for polio, for measles. I have heard of some Masonic temples in the States, for example, being used at vaccination sites now for COVID, obviously. Just out of
Yeah.
curiosity, any of your Masonic temples that either in your province or that you know of more generally, being used by health units for vaccinations, and are Masons helping out at them in terms of
Yeah.
providing refreshments and snacks? Have temples been used at all as a way
Yes.
to help families?
In our province, in Dorset, the province of most of, in fact, all the temples we've got, we don't really have any large temples. Most of ours are quite restricted in numbers. Maximum they can hold is about 100 people, 100 brethren in a meeting, and that's at a push. My own particular Masonic hall, based in Poole, is a listed building, and dates back to the 1800s, early 1800s, and the lodges met in that building and converted it. Well, they bought it and converted it back in the 1800s. It's not conducive for social distancing. One of the reasons why our hall has been closed over Masonic thing is because you under the rule of six, with 6 people, you could make it social distance, but any more than that, you couldn't. It's got one channel entrance and one channel exit, so it kind of restricted it. So as far as I'm aware, I don't know of any Masonic halls I know of no Masonic halls in Dorset were used as COVID vaccination centres. And as far as I'm aware, none in the UK have been used, but I might be wrong on that. However, some of the halls were purposed for providing food. So there was a scheme, part of the COVID scheme was to support like a Meals on Wheels service, which was called Square Meals. And that went out and was funded, but that was in different areas. So that was further up the country, where it was a more important thing. I know Masons generally, of the Masons that I know, we've all been working to some extent supporting COVID, depending on our vulnerability. Like I said, a lot of our guys are quite old, so that they would be less inclined to do that because they would be the ones that needed to be protected. But I know across the country, Freemasons have been involved in various things and supporting those as well. So, which is a good sign. It's what we do. So, yeah.
So moving on to your Masonic journey, you mentioned, near the start of this that, or maybe it was when we were talking offline, basically your responsibility now as provincial steward, basically become a full-time job for you after you've already retired. When you were first approached and asked to take the role of Grand Steward, what were your thoughts at the time of taking this role? Any trepidation at the time, and now that you're in it, and it's like being secretary, right? Once you get it, you're secretary forever. I guess what's your journey been like, and learning how to be the Grand Steward, and just what are your thoughts on the role and taking it?
I'm lucky in one respect, in that my proposer into Freemasonry, and I joined 18 years ago in my lodge. My proposer into Freemasonry is still a Mason, and he's actually my predecessor as Provincial Grand Charity Steward. So I followed him in his role. I was, prior to being asked to do the job of Provincial Grand Charity Steward, I was the Provincial Grand Orator, and I had been that for 5 years. So I was traveling around lodges giving talks, basically, and also part of the education team, educating brethren who were going towards the chair, so they could understand what the implications of that were, and sort of, what was expected of them, so it wasn't a bit of a shock when they finally landed in it. So I had a bit of experience from the provincial side of things as an officer in province. Initially, when I was asked to do it, I had to think about it. I must admit, I did have to think about it, because I knew what was on the horizon, which was the festival, raising money for MCF. It wasn't something I went into without a lot of thought, and also the cooperation of my wife, because it is a full-on job, and it does take up pretty much most of my spare time. And I am retired, so I've got, or should have, lots of spare time. So So yeah, without the support of my wife, I would not have been able to do it. And she was happy once we discussed it and worked out what was involved. That you know she would support me as I went through with it. So yeah.
And what's it been like, just from being asked to having taken on the role? Has there been anything that surprised you about it? Like, what's been your experience in the role of Windsor Grand Steward? Um, and I suppose, how much communication do you have? I'm not sure how many provinces there are in under the Grand Lodge auspices, but have you been communicating with your other Grand Stewards, and
Yeah.
have they been experiencing the same problems? And everybody's dealing with COVID. What's that been like working with your other provincial counterparts?
Okay, it's pretty good. We're everybody's pretty clued up with communications under COVID. That's the first thing. First of all, the first question was, were there any shocks once I took over the role of that? Not really, no. I was a charity steward for my own lodge, so in a very small scale, I did understand how that worked. I had a good mentor, which was my proposer. He sort of helped and guided me for a good few months on that side, and it's still there. When I've got an issue, I phone him up and say, I don't quite understand this. What do you think? And we can work it out. It's a great job. I think it's one of the best jobs in Freemasonry, because it's really, really rewarding, because you see the money being collected, and to some extent you can see it being given out to worthy causes. I don't interface with brethren that are in need. That's the almoner's job, but I interface with the charities that we support. So it's great to see how rewarding that is. And I go out to visit those charities to see how the money that we've donated gets used. And that's a really rewarding thing to see. When you recently in Poole Harbour, and one of the charities we supported is a young carers charity that does like adventure days for them, and to see all these kids that would normally spend all their time looking after their parents or looking after a member of their family rather than just being kids, spending a lot of time on the sea in Poole Harbour, on boards and all sorts of stuff, really enjoying themselves, was a really good thing. And knowing that we contributed to some extent to what that was. Moving on to your other question about communications, yes, we're all connected, all the provincial Grand Charity Stewards across the country. There's 48 of us. And there's some provinces split into two, or some counties split into two, and they have a larger team. We're quite small, so we don't have a big team. We're all in contact with each other. Every 2 years we have a conference, Charity Stewards Conference with the MCF. The next one is coming up in October, so that's just after lockdown, and is based in Bristol, and we'll all be going up to that, and it's a couple of days, and we'll be talking about lots of different aspects of fundraising, and the things that the MCF does. I've also been involved to some small extent in helping out writing the guides for MCF for provinces going into festival, and so I've been working with other charity stewards right around the country, and this was all done online. None of this is done face to face. It's all done over Zoom, and exchanging just data files, which is what I was used to doing anyway. It's how I used to work. So no, it's been really good, and we have this constant contact and also a constant communication with the MCF.
Looking ahead, do you think, and I'm not sure because I don't have the numbers for England. I can say in America and in Canada, we Freemasonry experienced a pretty significant boom period in the 1920s and again the 1950s. Anecdotally, I've been hearing that a lot of lodges began receiving petitions during lockdown, whatever jurisdiction they were in, and now have a backlog of interested applicants and candidates. And it's been interesting because there has been some trepidation amongst some Masons about this increase, especially. So I interviewed a Masonic author named John Bizak, who wrote Sins of Our Masonic Fathers. Basically, his concern is that the rapid increase that American Freemasonry saw in the 1920s, the lodges got so obsessed with membership numbers and increasing membership, they didn't spend the time to properly mentor and guide the new candidates. And then that resulted in the subsequent decline of membership, and then like this roller coaster that has been on the decline in our jurisdiction. So I'm just curious from your perspective, being across the pond. First of all, are you seeing, as Freemasonry reopens, this renewed interest and renewed applications? And then do you have any concerns about how lodges will handle this influx, and how they can manage to not only bring candidates in, but mentor them and guide them through their Masonic career?
Yes, in answer to the first question, is yes, there is definitely an increase in interest, partly fueled by some of the things that we've been talking about, some of the things we've been doing in the community, basically bigging us up, and people have started to get a bit more interested in that. And also this need to re-engage, I think, in a more meaningful way. So we're seeing it. My own lodge has got at least, I think it's 2 candidates so far, and we haven't even met yet. So we've got 2 lined up. We already were running on the crest of a wave before lockdown, and we had a series of guys coming in. I'm pretty cool with that, in the sense of people joining, and we're getting people joining in the traditional way. So they are friends of Masons in the lodge, but also brethren joining the lodge via the internet, via this, and making applications and then going through the process. And we've got to try and look at the way we manage that, such that those chaps that come in from the internet have the right opportunity to understand what it is that they're joining. Because a lot of times people just say, oh, I'd like to be a Freemason, but have no idea what it means. And they won't find that out to any great extent until they actually join a lodge and they're initiated. So it's to try and do that. And I'm actually, another role in my life, I'm actually the lodge membership officer for my lodge. And we have a scheme run by United Grand Lodge of England called the Pathway, which is very clever and a very clear way of taking someone from that initial, I would like to become a Freemason, all the way through to conversations within the lodges, conversations with other members of the lodge, interviews, because there's a formal interview involved, and then on from that initiation, but then not just forgetting about it once the initiation's taken place, but guiding them through all the various degrees that they'll work through, getting them to understand it, mentoring them, making sure that they've got someone there that can support them. Now that'll either be their friend if it's someone that's come in from a friendship side of things, or a lodge mentor, because that is an office in England and Wales. And the lodge mentor's job is to look at that and make sure these guys are actually supported and looked after. And during the meals and everything else, we make a big point of looking after our new brethren so that they enjoy the meeting, because at the end of the day, they are the future. They're the future of the lodge and the future of Freemasonry. And without those guys coming to the thing, then Freemasonry isn't going to go anywhere. So it is on the decline in terms of numbers. I've seen numbers drop since I joined significantly across Dorset, but hopefully we can claw that back to some extent.
And the other question looking ahead, is the resumption of Masonic travel. with so many things being shut down, obviously Masonic travel took a back seat in some ways. In other ways, it increased. I mean, in the virtual
Mm.
sphere, I've had the chance to all without wearing any pants, travel to Kentucky and California and Los Angeles and meet with brethren there at their virtual meetings. Uh, I have been pretty open recently and promoting because so many jurisdictions have reopened, resuming in-person traveling. The only reason I'm able to do that uh, safely is because I got vaccinated. So get
Yeah.
vaccinated. But I have had the chance to travel recently, and I'm resuming that. As lodges reopen in England, are you finding a renewed interest in travel? Are you able to, like, I don't know if there's any rules about Grand Lodge put down any rules about limiting your visitors or guests, but do you expect to see an increase in travel as lodges resume?
Yeah. I think well traditionally in this part of the country, as it is across England and Wales, lodges would officially invite guests to their meetings, and they generally would be masters of ruling masters of lodges nearby within their province. That tradition is still there. We're still inviting. In fact, I've had a number of invitations from lodges that are meeting in September for my own worshipful master. So that side of things will start, and of course that's kind of restricted not by Freemasonry but by the personal preferences of whoever has been invited, because the invitation goes to the master. Just friendly visiting, again, that's down to the brethren that decide that they want to do it. I don't think any lodges are turning visitors away. Indeed, I was a visitor in a lodge last Friday. So that side of things is going up. In terms of travelling, well, we're not a particularly large province when we think. So the furthest we travel is about 50 miles, and that is a long trip to a lodge meeting. Most of the lodge meetings are within 20-minute drive, 10-minute drive of where you're going to go. So that's one thing. United Grand Lodge of England, their quarterly communications are open again, whereas they had been closed meetings. They are now open, and I've just put myself into the next one, which is in London, which is in September. So, and that's a train trip for me. And so yeah, in terms of, are we back to normal? Probably not, but are we getting there? Yeah. And a lot of it depends on where COVID goes in the next 6 months.
It's funny the nature of Masonic travel in England or UK compared to Canada, or just travel in general. My pops is from Northern England.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he's from a town called Whistle, which I call majority, but I guess he's not technically, not from Newcastle, but he's in that area.
Yeah.
Met a Canadian girl, and that's how that goes. But
Okay.
he told me this story about when his mom, Grandma Lily, came to visit. So my parents live in Winnipeg, which is right in the middle of Canada.
Yeah.
And she was saying, I guess she had heard about the Calgary Stampede, which is 2 provinces over, and she, grew her whole life in England. So she goes, maybe we could pop down to Calgary for see the Stampede, for a day. And my dad had to say, well, that's about a 14-hour drive to get there. So, even some northern jurisdictions in Ontario, if you're the district deputy for that jurisdiction, it can be, especially if you're in like Kenora, it can be a 3-4 hour drive to get from one lodge to the next if you have to do your meetings. So a lot of them will spend the night at the master of the lodge's house, that type of thing. It's interesting. It's just that's one of those funny things. The difference is how close everything is in England compared to
I
how.
don't think many people appreciate just how close it is. Somebody says to me, "Well, we're going to go to London this afternoon," and you think, "Well, that's a long way away. It's only 100 miles, and it's a 2.5 hour drive to London. But that's a major trip for anybody to do, and I wouldn't drive it. I'd take the train because it's easier. But yeah, in terms of lodge trips around Dorset, a lot of lodges were based in sort of three groups. Four groups. So you've got the northeast, south, and west. But lodges around here, I could probably visit 4 or 5 different lodges. A lot more than that. I think it's probably about 10 in 4 different lodge buildings, and they're all within 10 minutes drive. So so it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier for chaps to do that visiting. But again, it's down to how safe they feel when they want to do it. And the guidelines from our provincial Grand Master, which is also from UGLE, is that you take the precautions you feel comfortable with within the guidelines already put out by the government. So, if you want to take extra precautions like wear a mask inside, you can, because we don't necessarily have to wear masks. I'd recommend it. In fact, I know when I go back, I will. But it's really down to the brethren that are doing that, what they do and how they do it.
And of course, again, I've been harping on it in my podcast, but one of the best things I think you could do Masonically and otherwise is getting yourself vaccinated.
Oh, yeah.
You haven't yet. I mean, I had the Masonic Medical Institute in New York, which is under the auspices of the Grand Lodge of New York. Their board had a surgeon on who was a member of the board, and I posted that clip. He just talked about the benefit and the value of getting vaccinated. What are the rates like right now? I don't know if you know or not in the UK.
In terms of vaccination or COVID rate?
Vaccination.
Vaccination, 89%, 86%, something like that. Vaccinated with first dose, 79% double dosed. We're now talking about vaccinating 16-year-olds. So, I'm moving it down. Schools are on holiday at the moment. It's the summer holidays for schools. And I think they're a bit worried that when the schools go back, it will start to circulate amongst the schools. And because they've seen that you can still get it if you're vaccinated, they want to try and cut that down. So if they can reduce it by vaccinating some of the kids that are in school, and the ones most likely to mix in a way that will transmit it, I think that's a good thing. So yeah, we're doing all right. Actually, we're doing. I don't know anybody that's not vaccinated.
Good. Yeah, I think we're about the same rate in Canada. I think a little bit less. But yeah, I think we're over 80% 1 dose and over 70% 2 doses. So
yeah.
At least in Ontario.
Yeah, so it's a good thing, and it's reassuring because we all miss our Masonic meetings, and without this, we wouldn't be able to hold them. And I know most of my brethren in my lodge are looking forward to getting back, just to have a good time, just to enjoy each other's company.
Absolutely. So I guess a good place to end this is, I know I have some viewers from the UK, from England. I don't know if I have any particularly in Dorset province, but hopefully I will after this. But
or not.
Even brethren in North America or wherever you're watching this or listening to this, I'm assuming that for your work with the festival, for your attempts to raise funds and charitable work, I'm assuming any Mason from anywhere or anybody is able to donate to these causes and send money. You can e-transfer, all that good jazz. So if people want to get in touch with you to talk about these charitable works in your province and how to support them, how do they go about doing that?
Okay, fairly straightforward, really. As with everything, every other organisation around the world, we have a website, and if you do a Google search for Dorset Freemasonry, you'll get the link for it. If you click on that link, you'll go to the website, and if you look on the right-hand side of the page, it says Festival 25 in a little column. Click on that, and there's all sorts of information there on how to donate, what the festival is, a bit more about what I've been talking about, and also some stories about where the money goes, which is an important thing, so people can understand and see how we're spending our money and supporting not just Freemasons, but like I said, the community in general, which is an important thing. So yeah, Google Dorset Freemasonry.
And I will throw a link down in the description for this video. With that, I'll, everybody who want to support the podcast, like, subscribe, comment, all that good jazz that you're supposed to do on these things. Give me money on Patreon, all that stuff. And with that, worshipful sir, thank you so much for being taking the time to be on the podcast, and hopefully you're my second interview I've had from the UK, but hopefully not my last.
Okay, well, thank you very much for letting me speak, and it's been a great pleasure. And it's Peter, is actually not worshipful sir, just Peter.
All right, well, thank you so much, Peter, and thank you for not making fun of me or my dad when you found out he's a Geordie. Most people from the UK have a few jokes about.
Well, you probably won't answer that, but although I live in Dorset and I grew up in Dorset, I'm not from Dorset. I'm from the north of England, and I'm from Liverpool. So I'm what they call a Scouser. So equally sort of punished by everybody and laughed at. So yeah. So no, I understand. It's all right.
They all have to stick together, all you other folk.
All right. Funny accents.